Being in a plane crash is a uniquely horrifying experience to contemplate. But imagine being on a jet that goes down and then learning that you are the only survivor. How would you digest this information? Would you consider it bad luck, good luck, divine intervention? There are such people among us. It is a very small survivors club, and one of the members is a 4-year-old girl, now all grown up and speaking out for the very first time. Here's ABC's Alex Perez.
There's nothing more horrifying than a plane plummeting from the sky. But for members of an exclusive club of 14 sole survivors of plane crashes, the experience is a lifelong badge of terror.
At least one confirmed survivor.
One known survivor.
This is Cecelia Sheehan, who in 1987, at just 4 years old, became the little girl known as America's Orphan.
The whole world is rooting for Cecelia.
Flight 255 had just taken off from Detroit Metro Airport when it crashed, killing 154 on board, 2 on the ground. But out of tragedy, one miracle.
4-year-old Cecelia Sheehan has now been told by relatives that her mother, father, and 6-year-old brother died in that crash.
I think about the accident every day. When I look in the mirror, I have visual scars, my arms and my legs, and I have a scar on my forehead.
26 years later, Cecelia is finally telling her story in a new documentary called Sole Survivor. She doesn't remember the crash, but knows exactly when she understood.
I was maybe in middle school, high school maybe, and I remember feeling angry and survivor's guilt.
And meet George Lamson. At age 17, the only person alive after Galaxy Airlines Flight 203 went down in Reno in 1985.
Didn't know if I was alive or not, but I realized that I got up, I ran away.
The documentary follows Lamson as he connects with the few others who know what it's like to be the lone survivor of a horrific plane crash. Comair Flight 5191, co-pilot John Palinki, his plane went down seconds after takeoff in Lexington, Kentucky in 2006. He still struggles with survivor's guilt.
I've cried harder than any man has ever cried or should be able to cry. And my wife was there to support me to where I could just put my head on her shoulder and cry.
And then there's Bahia Bakari, who at age 14 survived 9 hours in the Indian Ocean, clinging to plane wreckage when Yemenia Flight 626 plummeted in 2009.
This is the burn here. My face was burned. I had a cut on my forehead.
J'en ai là. On m'a greffé, là. Là. Là, sur le cou.
Here?
Et là aussi un peu, mais elle se voit plus beaucoup.
While there are only a handful of sole plane crash survivors, amazingly, 95% of people involved in plane crashes live to tell the tale. You might not think anyone could have survived this breathtaking crash off the coast of Africa in 1996, but of the 175 people on board this Ethiopian Airlines flight, 50 made it out alive. And every passenger and crew member survived this Lion Air crash last month in Bali, a scene reminiscent of the most remarkable survivor story in memory, when Captain Chesley Sully Sullenberger crash-landed in the Hudson shortly after takeoff. All 150 passengers and the 5 crew survived, the so-called miracle on the Hudson. But short of a miracle, there are ways to increase your chances of escaping the unthinkable alive. To find keys to survival, Professor Ed Galea has interviewed 2,000 survivors of 105 plane crashes.
There is no magic seat on board an aircraft. There is no one seat that is the safest seat on the aircraft.
But statistics do suggest you should try to sit within 7 rows of an emergency exit and preferably take an aisle seat. That way, it's easier to get to an exit. In 2005, another miracle, this one when an Air France jet crashed in Toronto, caught fire and broke apart. Every passenger and crew member survived.
We saw flames, it was just totally orange out the window. We couldn't see where we were going and people started panicking. Everyone jumped out of their seats.
Lauren, like half of all airline passengers, was traveling in a group.
If you're traveling in a family group, you should insist that the airline does not separate you through the aircraft. You should be seated together. Why? Well, it's only natural that if you're involved in that sort of situation, you're going to want to reunite the group before you evacuate. If you do that, that's going to cause havoc.
While Hollywood has done its best to dramatize a plane crash, like in last year's blockbuster Flight,
brace for impact.
Nothing is more dramatic than seeing the real thing firsthand. Discovery Channel's Curiosity plane crash compiled a team of experts and rigged a 727 jet with cameras, sensors, and test dummies, and then crashed it into a Mexican desert to see if there are ways to help passengers survive when tragedy unfolds. Their conclusion, bracing for impact can indeed be a lifesaver.
The brace position is designed to reduce your chances of being knocked unconscious during a heavy impact. And you must be conscious, obviously, to evacuate.
And for the Survivors Club, the lifelong struggle to understand why they alone made it out. Last night in Detroit, ABC News was there exclusively for an emotional screening of Soul Survivor. In the audience, family members of those whose loved ones were killed on Flight 255, for the first time hearing from the one person who lived.
Me surviving was random. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
For all of you who lost someone on that flight, what does Cecelia mean to you?
It's kind of like our little girl. She'll always be our little girl.
When you see the footage of the wreckage, it's just a complete miracle and blessing that somebody walked away from that.
Also in the theater, John Theed, the firefighter who first spotted Cecelia.
What was it like when you saw that arm and you heard her voice?
Well, I think the crew that was all involved in that area couldn't believe that somebody could have been alive. You know, I thought maybe there's a little dowel that we were stepping on and we could hear this moan because we couldn't find it. And when we found it and found her, it was just elation. It was like a feeling that you couldn't describe.
Soul Survivor, a blessing and a burden, says the film's director, Kai Dickens.
What do you want people to get out of this film?
I think the most important thing that people can take away is that, you know, survivors are really victims too.
But still, like Cecelia, who's now married and studying art therapy, they forge forward.
I'm happy. I've never been happier.
For Nightline, I'm Alex Perez in Detroit.